Tonight's entertainment is provided by Richard Warwick. Now, Richard Warwick, you might know him as our editor for Light Railways, but he's turning his hand to giving us a presentation about tramways and other bits and pieces of the Victorian State Rivers and Water Supply Commission. They had changing technologies over the years, but in their early days, they certainly had a lot of tramways around. But I won't talk any more about it, and I'll hand it over to Richard. Thank you.
Richard, you need to press your space bar. Richard, you need to press your space bar. Now, look at the left-hand corner, down the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a mute. Just unmute yourself.
Hello, is that better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Right, now the screen's right, is it, Mike?
Yes, we're good.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Bill. Thanks, Mike. And welcome to, why won't that change? What's happening here, Mike?
It's not changing.
No. Oh, dear.
Now, do you have you got to operate from within your presentation?
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, you got the window. You should be able to do it.
Oh, great.
Well, it worked the other night.
It did. For those, we tried this the other night and nothing happened, but Mike persisted along with my wife and fixed it, I thought, but we can't make it to run. What do we do, Michael?
Well, if you can't, we just go to plan B.
Oh, there we go. There we go. I've got it.
Okay. Plan B's just stopped.
Okay. Sorry about all that. Hopefully the technology works. And we nailed it down to the fact that I'm running this off Apple. And Mike says we've never done it with Apple before. Anyway, I want to talk tonight about some of the old tramways used by the State Rivers and Water Supply Commission here in Victoria. So what I want to do, what is the State Rivers? Talk about the use of tramways in the construction of a whole lot of dams that they did. And I want to look closely at three particular dams: the Sugarloaf Reservoir, the Yarrawonga Weir, and the Lauriston Reservoir. All quite different in their construction technique and use of tramways. A little bit about me. I've been a member since 1974. I'm a civil engineer. I've almost retired. I still do a little bit of consulting work. I've mainly worked on roads, bridges, railways, done quite a few rail jobs and tunnels and so on. And I'm not an expert on locomotives. So I'm sure there are lots of people on the line tonight. If I get stuck, they'll be able to help. And I note, so it was Ian Gauntlet, I think, said he worked for the State Rivers. So that's good. If I get stuck, I'll call on you, Ian. And as Bill said,
civil engineer.
Excellent. And lastly, as Mike said, or Bill said, I'm currently the editor of Light Railways, so that takes up quite a bit of my time. Interestingly, the research I did on these was done quite some time ago, and I frankly haven't had a lot of chance to do more because of the editor's duty. However, we will persist. Okay, what is the State Rivers? It was formed in 1905 by the Victorian government, responsible for all water supply in rural Victoria, not the Melbourne. That was the MMBW. State Rivers took over a number of local water supply authorities that were scattered around the place. And they took on the task of building a whole range of new dams across the state. The State Rivers, it no longer exists. It succumbed to, I guess, was probably back in the Jeff Kennett days when most government departments changed. It became the Rural Water Commission for a while, and now it's made up of a whole range of water companies across the state. The they did a lot of building of dams and so on between 1905 right up to 1950, and probably a bit later after that. The first light railways article that I can find was back in 1967 by a gentleman called Peter Charrett, who I met briefly once, and he was a surveyor with the State Rivers. And that article covered a whole lot of sites, and the research I've done, there were many modes. There was human, in other words, pushing carts around on 2-foot gauge tracks, lots of horses, lots of gravity inclines throughout the sites. A couple of them used steam locos, lots of diesels, and later on, in the most recent work, modern earth-moving equipment. So I'm only looking at 3 of the sites covered by Peter's article. Mike has already written and presented on Toowoomba and also Redcliff's pumping station tramways. So there's lots there if anyone's interested to have a look at. And there's lots and lots of information. There's some great photos. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to do some research. It's good. So there's a copy of the front page of LR21 from 1967. It had a map by Peter of where all the dams and so on were. In fact, there's probably a whole lot more than those. And most of those shown on there had tramways. They used tramways during the construction. So it's well worth a read. It's a bit of an overview, but certainly of interest if you've got access. Well, we've all got access to LR21 on the web. I've got lots of photos to show you tonight. They're all from the State Library of Victoria website. They've got an excellent collection there. Far too many to show you all. I'd keep you up all night. Their website says they're out of copyright, but they encourage their use. And I've got to say, as editor, the State Library of Victoria and a couple of others, they're very good with making high-resolution photos available. Right, so there's a map of Victoria. There are the 3 sites that we're going to look at. Eildon in central Victoria, up near Mansfield or Alexandra. Yarrawonga on the Murray, and Lauriston up near Bendigo. So the first one we look at, and I'll talk to you about these in chronological order. The first one was Sugarloaf Reservoir, which is now called Eildon Reservoir. So just to confuse everyone, there's the Board of Works have got a Sugarloaf Reservoir out near Christmas Hills. It's not that one, it's the one up at Eildon. So the plan there was to build a huge dam wall and a reservoir on the Goulburn River at Eildon, form a new water storage to feed the irrigation systems right across northern Victoria. Up until the time of the construction of this, there was a dam at Nagambie, which fed into Waranga Basin. And so that's at that time, back in 1915 or thereabouts, all of the irrigation water came out of those 2. No one was really tapping the upper reaches of the Goulburn River, which this does. The work started in 1915. It wasn't finished until 1929, which seems an inordinate time, but when you work through all of the issues, it was interrupted by World War I, lots of material and labour supply shortages, all those sorts of things conspired to delay it and took forever to build. Then after it was opened and the dam was filled, it wasn't that long, I think it was about 6 or 8 months after it was filled, there was a major failure of the wall where parts of it had collapsed about 20 feet, slumped down. So obviously there was a major issue and there was an inquiry called and they had to fix it, but they had to drain out the dam to avoid breaking through and flooding downstream. So that caused a lot of issues, obviously, for those living downstream. the dam wall that's currently there, it's since been modified on at least 3 separate occasions to extend and raise it and so on. So what I'm talking about tonight, you can't see anything. It's all been buried and covered over, and there's a lot bigger wall there now. There's a major expansion in 1947, and then even as recent as 2012, they raised the level of the dam again to increase the capacity. So, so there's nothing really there of the original work. And as I say, it's now known as Eildon Reservoir. Now, just to explain, so for those of you who are not familiar, here's the dam site in central Victoria. There's Mansfield up here and Alexandra here. So the Goulburn River runs right through this way. So it's a bit of an isolated site. The dam wall is here. So to get men, materials, plant and so on, it's quite a circuitous route because the Victorian Railways had built their line from Tallarook across to Mansfield in, I can't remember, in the early 1900s. I'm sorry, I don't have that. Then they also built a branch line to Alexandra. And at Alexandra Station now, that's where the Alexandra Timber Tramway Museum is right now. Then from Alexandra, the Rubicon Lumber and Tramway Company built a 2-foot gauge line from Alexandra through Thornton up into the Rubicon Forest. And that's all covered by Peter Evans' excellent book, Rails to Rubicon. So to get materials to the site, for example, machinery from Melbourne, to put it on the Victorian Railways, bring it up to Alexandra, unload it there, transship it across to the 2-foot gauge Rubicon Lumber and Tramway Company. Then that would go for 9 miles on that tramway, unload it again at Thornton, where the State Rivers had a depot. And then they would put it on horse-drawn carts and take it another 9 miles up to the site. So quite an effort to get materials in there. Now you probably asked the question, well, why didn't they build an extension of the 2-foot gauge into Eildon? That was certainly looked at by a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it was decided not to do that. And indeed, for the whole term of the construction, everything was brought along those horse-drawn wagons along roads. And then there's lots of talk at the time they were looking at this. They had great difficulty getting rails and so on. So quite a remote site. Took a lot of effort to get materials in there. Now these are design plans of the actual dam across the valley. Might be a bit hard to tell. It's about the best one I could get, so I apologise. So it's the earth dam wall across there and a concrete spillway, all within the confines of the valley from here to here. And in cross-section, you look here, the design was such that there's a concrete core wall built from, dug out of the trench down to solid rock. So that was built on solid rock, a clay core, and then either side, at very flat slopes, rock filling. So the clay core was designed for to have on the upstream side an impermeable base to hold the water in. But as time went on, in fact, what actually happened when the failed, once they filled the dam up, because the clay wasn't properly compacted, it filled with water and actually slumped. So that caused, as I say, a bit of a failure and great consternation. And then that's a cross-section through the spillway. So that was a solid concrete spillway. So that's what they're trying to build. Just in terms of dimensions, that concrete wall and the dam wall is about 3,000 feet long, and its highest point 135 foot high. So quite a huge undertaking to be done back in 1915. In terms of construction materials, there was enough earth filling available on the site, so they didn't have to bring that in. They had to dig it out and place it, of course. There was sufficient hard rock available on the site. So they used steam-powered portable crushers and so on. And I'll show you some photos of that. They crush it to the usable size to make the concrete. The sand was available upstream in the Delatite River, so there was a horse tramway system used to bring that down to the concrete plant. Cement came from Melbourne, as did steam equipment, portable tracks. It was all delivered, as I say, through the VR and so on. And they had a camp, because they were so isolated, we had a camp set up on site to house the men. Now, this is a general arrangement, an excellent plan that Mike McCarthy's prepared, that when I finally finish all this will be an article in Light Railways. So this beautiful plan will go with it. So what we've got, the earth and rockfill wall through here, concrete spillway here, and then quarries, the hard rock quarry here and here. The sand was upstream here, 2 or 3 miles upstream. And these two quarries had the rock fill, which was all just carted down via an incline here and placed across here. And on the downstream side, all the works area with the workshops, boiler houses, stables, etc., etc. So, for example, the sand would come from up the Delatite River along the 2-foot gauge through here, across a bridge, across the river. So during construction, they had to keep the river flowing at all times. So there was always water flowing through there. So they needed that bridge. And then they would bring it in and place it in stockpiles ready to take up to the concrete mixing plant. So that's broadly how it worked. And lots of hard rock over here, incline, down to the crushing plant, steam crushers. So that's the broad layout of it. Now let's look at some of the photos we can go through. Some very early days, as I say, we had the concrete core wall. They had to dink out this trench down to solid rock. That was all done with horse and dray, slow process. That's looking to the, what's that, to the west. So that's Sugarloaf Mountain there. You can see the start quarries here. This is very early days, so that's right at the start of the project. Again, a little bit further on, looking at the Sugarloaf Mountain, you can see the sand tram comes along here from up on the Delatite River. Quarries and so on there. Progress a bit further. So you can see that concrete core wall that went right across, slowly coming up out of the ground. You can have, over here is the stockpiles of crushed rock and sand to go into the mixing plants in here. Now, I put this one in, so that's a core wall being built, and just shows some of the ingenuity or the improvisation that these guys did on site. So this is a vertical steel boiler mounted carriage on about, I would guess, about 20-foot gauge that runs along parallel to the wall, and you can see the 2-foot gauge tracks in here. So that would, from the concrete mixing plant, they bring the trucks in here. Then they've got this like a gallows crane that would lift them up and put it right up the top and pour the concrete in stages as it went up. So, and lots of these steam-powered machinery right throughout the site, and pretty clever stuff. Now that's on the western side. So that's on the Sugarloaf Hill. You can see the hard rock that is slowly mined and brought down to the bottom and loaded into trucks, taken up into the crushers, and then dropped down. And then you can see that just make out the tramway trucks, and it would be taken across to the stockpile and into the concrete mixing plant. Now you probably look at this and think, it's pretty dangerous stuff, breaking the rock up the top here and rolling it down to be picked up. Same up here with an incline from that quarry, bring it down and up into the crushers. And these are pretty dangerous places to work, as you can imagine. So, and there were quite a few fatalities of rock falling onto men and so on. And the horse tram was another one that seemed to run over men quite a lot. So a dangerous place. Now, I'll put that one in. It just shows the sorts of, this spreading concrete across the side. That's in fact building the spillway. So it's a solid concrete mass. And the trucks behind us, the concrete mixing plant, it's placed into these, pushed around the tracks by men, tipped onto the side and so on. So a massive 2-foot gauge tracks crisscrossed around the site. And these tracks, obviously, they go up with the work. So all temporary track. Now here, just to show that they're loading by hand all these 1 cubic yard tramway trucks. So it must have been hard work. So lots of men working on the site, and all of this loaded by hand. So that was fairly typical of how things were done on this project. And hard work, obviously, working in the river. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing. I suspect they had a lot of floods through there, so they probably had to clean out after the floods, or possibly even the sand to go into the concrete. There's an overview of the site again. That we just saw the tracks in here, concrete mixing plant over here, stockpiles and so on with tram tracks. There's the bridge across the Goulburn River, and the tram tracks came in around here. So a general overview, that's looking downstream. As you can see, the dam's slowly filling up as the dam wall comes up, but there's a tunnel through here that lets the water flow through the river. Another general overview, the dam wall's gone up a bit higher. So your concrete core walls in the middle there. And rock filling, generally from these quarries on this side, it's very hard to pick out, but these are all inclines. So that was all steam winch at the top, but generally gravity fed from the quarry. And that's where most of the rock filling came from. So gravity fed, pushed across the site either by men or dragged by horses. In the foreground here, lots and lots of tramway trucks, which have, so the bridge is back here. They would bring in the crushed rock, sand, put it into these stockpiles here. You can see there's stables and plants and so on, and the concrete mixing plant is just in there. Oh, and there's the tunnel allowing the water to flow through the river. So as the dam wall rose, you can see the reservoir starting to fill up. Just a few more facts. As I said before, 130 foot, 5 foot high, 3,000 foot long. The highest number of men on site was about 900. It's interesting to read some of the reports. The unions were, Australian Workers Union were on site, and by and large are pretty happy with how things were going. Lots of social occasions and so on, but there was a tent city on the downside of the dam wall. And as I say, at least 5 fatalities. There were probably more, and the local newspapers give pretty good reports on all that. And I suspect there were more, and I need to do just that little bit more research. Interestingly, in terms of costs, it was originally estimated to cost £375,000, and actually it ended up costing 1.325. So things haven't really changed, have they? For those of us living in Victoria, there's lots of major projects happening right now that are just below their budgets inordinately. So things were no different back then. And I'm not sure really why, but I suspect that it takes so long, and they had all the war and material shortages. So they had 31 miles of rail, all of it either 12 or 30 pound per yard rail. And virtually all of that was temporary tracks. And it, as the wall came up, it got lifted up and moved across the site. So it was well and truly worn out by the end of it. And the records that I've been through, at least, and probably more than 215 1 cubic yard trucks. That's the concrete mixing plant. As you can see, the trucks of the stockpiles over here. They bring them in, via steam winch to drag them up, tip the contents into here, mix it up, and then taken out onto the site. So lots of inclines and so on. But interestingly, most of it was either gravity, manual, or horse-drawn. There were I can't find any records of a steam loco used on this site. On the repair to the project after it failed, they did bring some Malcolm Moore tractors in to use around the site. So, but by and large, there was no steam locos, which is fascinating. Some sort of inspection. Lots of men with white coats, I'm not sure. So the quarries, they can see that is one of the incline tracks. A bit hard to tell. It's probably out of use at this stage. And again, just typical of the temporary nature of the tracks, that they moved all over the place. I'm not sure, they possibly even timber rails. That's the bridge across the Goulburn River to the work site over here. And that's the only photo I've been able to find of from the quarries up on the hill beside the double track incline that fed into the site. And this is late in the piece, so the dam wall is fairly high at this stage. But the photographers on the site, for some reason, didn't go around taking lots of photos that we could use showing light railways. So we got to get glimpses. And that's all we can get half the time, which is a bit frustrating. Another overview. So there's the bridge, quarries over here, tram lines coming in here, around, you can see, and tram lines across into the concrete mixing plant. Lots of trucks all over the site. But as I say, no steam locos to pull them around, which is interesting. Another overview, it's building the spillway across the river. Nearly getting up to the top. This is dam's filling up, nearly there. So these incline and the tramways are mainly gone, although you can see a few here, there, and everywhere around the site. Now this one is, if you look really closely, this is the repairs. You look closely, there's the tram lines here. So the repairs were basically to add more fill on both sides to stabilise the wall. So by this stage, so we're talking the mid to late 20s, they brought Malcolm Moore tractors in to move the material around the site. If you look very closely, you can see those. Right, that's all I had. There's lots, as I say, lots and lots of photos in State Library of the construction of Eildon, but in the interest of time, that's all I have for Eildon, a massive project. And even as recently, I was up that way over Christmas. The dam is chock-a-block full, so that's good. Next one I want to look at is Yarrawonga, so on the Murray River. Yarrawonga Weir. So again, it was for irrigation, built for irrigation, and it formed Lake Mulwala. So if you go up there now, a huge lake, Mulwala, which was constructed by putting a weir across the Murray River right in the middle of Yarrawonga Township. and that was to provide water for northern Victoria and also southern New South Wales. It was constructed between 1935 and 1939, so just before the war. Right in the middle of the town and right next to a Victorian Railways station there. They set up a works area at the VR station. VR built special sidings just for the works. And that's the line that crosses into New South Wales and goes up to Oaklands. And that line was kept open for the whole time. Unlike Eildon, they had a cableway, a Lidgerwood cableway. State Rivers, in fact, bought 2 of these things. So that was over the site, one on either side of the river, and used to take materials and put it very carefully where it was needed. So in 1935, there was a lot of equipment transferred from other State Rivers jobs, particularly Hume Weir, which was almost finished, and some of the lock works on the Murray. I think it was in particular Lock 10, Murray up at Mildura. I think I'm right in that. They had to import lots of materials, so cement again came up from Melbourne on the VR. Screenings came from a former gold mine over at Chiltern. Again, that was, they could put that on VR and bring it to the site. They used 6 locos on site, unlike Eildon. So there's 1 Krause, 2 Black Hawthorns, and 3 Malcolm Moores. And they used an extensive system of 2-foot gauge tracks across the site. Interestingly, it's a weir across the river, and again, they had to keep the river flowing. So they built it in 2 stages. The northern half, so they drove all the sheet piling in the river to allow them to get in and allow the flow to continue. And then once the northern side was done, they then switched the river across and built the south side. Now, I apologise. This is the best. It's the best plan I could get showing the extent of the work. So the river comes through here. They built a concrete weir so the water could flow over, and that's got these gates over the top. So they are lifted or raised accordingly. So that's the weir, a large earth embankment on the northern side. So that's the southern side. So I apologise for the quality of that, but that's the best I could get. So there's a quick site plan. So the river runs through, the township is here. That's the original river. The weir was built here, just downstream of the Victorian Railways, which is a bridge across the river, as is the highway. And that weir formed Lake Mulwala, that you go there today. So a works area next to the railway station, so they built extra sidings in here. So that was very convenient to be able to do that. Now in red, I've shown, like Eildon, all these tramway tracks are temporary and move constantly, but that's the sort of layout. So they dug a lot of material out here, took a lot of it up. There's a golf course. A lot of it went in to build the embankment on the northern side. A lot of it went down here to raise the river banks. And also, as a lot was taken around the town to fill and form the banks of Lake Mulwala to protect the town. And they took material up to this Victoria Park. So quite an extensive system of 2-foot gauge tramway tracks. Now, a few quick shots. So you'll see lots of tramway tracks all over the place. This is the construction on the northern side. So all this sheet piling's been driven in the river. So the water flows through on the left-hand side, enabling all this to be dug out. So you can see here, I think that's loading trucks by hand again. Then they'd be taken up here and either taken over to the golf course up here or to lift the riverbank down through here, or indeed to to build the earth embankment. One of the Malcolm Moors, you can see here, the carting material. I think that's forming the new embankment. Another one here. So lots of these are running all over the site, and then you can see the tower for the cableway. Again, forming the edge of Lake Mulwala with lots of tracks and embankments out here. This is on the north side, so the golf course is just up in here. But at the same time all this is happening, you can still see lots of horse-drawn scoops. So there's a lot of that. And I think that was to dig the clay out of up here to form behind the concrete of the dam wall. And again, this is forming the concrete with lots of 2-foot gauge tracks all over the site to bring the concrete in and form the weir. And then up on the top, you can see a train of, not really sure what they're doing up there, but probably delivering concrete or components for the concrete to be mixed and put on the site. Again, just an overview of the site. Lots of these steam cranes around. Malcolm Moore tractors in there, running all over the place, delivering fill and concrete. So that's from the north side looking across the river. So the cableway tower, that's the works area. The VR station is in here and the township just over here. But there's the Victorian Railways bridge taking their line across to Oaklands, which that was all retained as part of the works. And this is filling in behind the concrete with clay using horse-drawn scoops. Another shot just of concrete. So there's the weir here, and these are the towers that formed. That's where the gates go in here and here to be able to raise the level in Lake Mulwala. Again, these cranes and scoops, like a drag line doing some work. So that's all rail mounted on, I don't know, would that be 10-foot gauge or thereabouts? They're scooping that out of the river, put it into these tippers, so that, and then the train comes underneath and they're filled up. And the same is happening over here. So lots of these look pretty basic, all steam driven, vertical steel boilers, steam boilers. Just a shot of the Malcolm Moore, the driver. As I said at the start, I'm not a locomotive expert. I think that's the Black Hawthorn that came from one of the jobs up on the Murray. And I think it came down on a barge. And there they are lifting it into place. And I'm not sure today's health and safety requirements would allow them to have men up there. Things are different. And here we are loading again through the box, which would fill it out and put it straight into the trucks. And the steam loco takes it away to wherever it's needed. Overview of the sites. It's a bit more advanced at that stage. Near completion, so your cableway across the top. We're putting rock beaching on so the Lake Mulwala is in here. And that's just about finished, getting ready, put the rock lining there to protect the banks. And the Malcolm Moore will deliver it, and lots of horses here, there and everywhere. Right, so that's Yarrawonga. And the last one I want to look at is Lauriston. So that's more recent. So that's in central Victoria near the town of Kyneton. Construction was from 1938 to 1941. So again, interrupted by the war, Second World War. And the reason they built this one was that whilst there are a couple of reservoirs downstream, they were worried they weren't collecting enough water for Bendigo's water supply. So that's the reason it was built. And this one's different in that the project is really just a mass concrete buttress type wall across a narrow valley. So not as much earthworks on this one, and quite some interesting construction techniques to get there. The crew and lots of equipment mainly came from Yarrawonga because as Yarrawonga finished, this one was starting. And they utilised a lot of unemployed workers, which were housed on an on-site camp and had a maximum of 330 on the site at its peak. And interestingly, you read the local papers that that caused a lot of unemployed men from Melbourne mainly, and a lot of the unemployed people from the local Kyneton area were a bit miffed by this, that they were missing out on work. So there was an extensive works area. It's about 7 kilometres from Kyneton, so most of it was delivered by road, which is interesting because there was no rail line directly adjacent to the site. They set up a large concrete mixing plant on site, and they had to produce 35,000 cubic yards. Another cableway was elected, and it covered the whole site. And there's a typo. And then lots of 2-foot gauge tramways used extensively, mainly to deliver concrete and for all the earthworks. And then once this job was finished, everything was transferred to Rocklands, which is up near the Grampians. But again, that was all held up by Second World War. That's the plan. So basically, a fairly narrow confined valley and a concrete buttress across the top. And if you look closely, there's steps in the rockwork. So the whole thing was built obviously on solid rock. So there was a need to dig out all this benching to get the clay material off and down to the solid rock. So there's a layout of the whole works. As you come in from Kyneton, there was the camp, the workman's camp. They had the cableway, so with a tower at either end, one here and a rotating one here. So that could cover the whole of the site. With concrete mixing plant, aggregate heaps and so on, all here. And then I've had to superimpose. I couldn't find any maps with where the tramways were. So that's the sort of arrangement that you'll see photos in a moment of all this benching as you work down the slope. So they had this convoluted tram system that was in fact connected, but to get from over here to over here, you had to go through a lot of switchbacks and so on. So quite a complicated arrangement, but it all worked. So let's now look at some photos. So concrete mixing plant with the tramway running through underneath. So it would be mixed in here and drop down here, and the trams would take it by and large across to, jumping a bit, to the cableway, tip the concrete into skips. The cableway would lift them up and then place it directly into where it was needed. Again, this is moving in the earthwork stage, just moving fill around the site on these 2-foot gauge trams. A small wall, a concrete wall that they're building over the back, so all the concrete being delivered. So this is right over the other side, so it was mixed on the other side of the valley, put in a tram, put on the cableway, and then picked up on this side of the valley by this tram and taken to this small wall. So quite a long and convoluted process. There's a concrete skip loading it onto sides. Now, so this is from one side of the valley looking across. So that's the cableway that's on the track, so it can swing around and cover the site. So the dam wall, the dam wall goes in here, and these are all the benches to dig out the rock and take the fill away from the site. Now that's where all the trams were used. Like this, you can see the Malcolm Moore pulling, so excavated out, taken across. So quite an interesting way of doing it. So if we were building that dam now, you'd have a large excavator on site, which would just sit there and dig out these benches with no need at all for tramways to move it around the site. Dump trucks, of course, but a large excavator could do basically everything that's required, but they didn't have it back in those days, of course. So that's how times change. So again, just stepping through, digging out and building and digging out to rock, forming the bench to build the concrete on. There's the cableway up there. Another shot. So another one where the Colaburn River, they had to keep it flowing through the site. A couple of times it flooded and caused all sorts of problems, but we had sheet piling and trams all over the site. Fascinating way to build it, and probably not very efficient. So as the concrete was placed in here with from over the top with the cableway, again you can see lots of tram trucks and Malcolm Moores used to take it out to the side, or in fact to deliver concrete. So that's as the wall gets higher and higher, you can see the cableway over the top. No trams, I can't see any there. So by that stage of construction, they were really only used up on the top to deliver concrete. Again, the stepping stones in and around. And that's a shot from just under the cableway. So that cable tower moved across there. If you go on site now, the bench where the tracks for the cableway, that's still there. And the dam wall is here. As you can see, lots and lots of tram tracks and displayed tram. As I say, the site got flooded several times and washed things out. You can see them there trying to recover works. So there's the concrete mixing plant. You can look down the tram lines feeding into the workshops and concrete supply. So this is up on the top. So that's where it all, and over the back was aggregate storage areas. So tram lines around there to deliver material. I put that one in because I just wanted to show, this is early 40s. So by this stage, we've got tractor hauled dozers with what are called sheep's foot rollers or heavier rollers to compact the earth. But they'd learned their lessons from Eildon, where all that was done with horse and cart and didn't really achieve proper compaction. And when the clay got wet, that's when the problems were. So by that stage, they were using more modern, so-called modern equipment. And that's the finished job at Lauriston. So the dam wall here, the cableways are still in place. They stayed there right to the end because they needed them to put the gates in. And interestingly, before the gates actually got placed, they did a trial, I think it was of this tower, and fired up the motor that was used to, or the steam engine to drive that thing. They obviously did something wrong, because when they came back next morning, the whole thing had burnt down and collapsed. So they had to do a different way of putting the gates in. Interesting. And I think that's it. So thank you. And I'd be very happy to take any questions or be involved in any discussion. So Mike, I now press that one.
Good job.
Right. Thank you.
Oh,
Over
thank
to
you,
Bill.
Richard, for that fascinating presentation. There's a lot of photos there. A lot of people wouldn't have seen at all. No, that's going to be an interesting article when you finally get around to it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You-
Question.
What you need to do, Bill, is replace me as editor. Then I'll have time to do it.
No,
Oh,
we
no.
can't
No
do it.
way.
No, you do a fantastic job, Richard. So
Well, you'll just have to wait longer.
yeah. One thing, Yarrawonga, I believe that was the first weir that was built on the Murray that didn't have locks in it. For the
Absolutely right.
Yes.
yeah.
But they kept one paddle boat above the weir, and it may have been the one that brought the barge down with that loco, and it was still there in the early 60s. It's now on private property.
Okay. The barge. Or the
No, the actual paddle steamer itself.
paddle steamer.
Australian.
Yeah. Which one was that?
Australian. It was unusual. It had a rope drive.
Oh, right.
I've
Okay.
got photos, but
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, this has caused a lot of grief having no lock there. So for river people, Yarrawonga to Goolwa is the holy grail for lots of boats.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Other questions?
Great photo in the background, Rod, with the tram line across Waranga Basin.
Well judged. And I think one of our guests tonight is sitting, it's too small for him to tell. I think Murray Felstead is one of the people, obscured though. And Murray's watching tonight. It's a light railways trip, obviously.
Yeah.
Richard, Mike, the one thing about Sugarloaf, I think, but I could be wrong, but I've got a sense that that original wall is still there.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's been buried, I think. Well,
No, it's
perhaps
been
not all of
flooded. It sits on
under the water, inundated.
Yeah, that's right. It's upstream of the wall, and when the
Oh,
water
okay.
drops, it emerges.
Ah,
So you go up there, and when it's full, you don't see anything. But late summer or something, you do. So the wall you see now which is Eildon, it was built slightly downstream from the original.
I've got photos of the exposed wall. It's been exposed several times in recent years. And in my message, there's not just the old Bonnie Doon that got submerged. That was with the expansion of Eildon. There's another town, and I can't think what its name was, on the Goulburn itself, that's buried underneath the lake.
Yeah.
Darlingford.
Yeah.
Richard, did you manage to find out who built the rolling stock that was used on those projects?
they were bought by State Rivers. I might get this wrong, so I can chase that up. They were bought through Cameron and Sutherland, and there was I think they were made in West Footscray. Someone will know.
It's Sewell, I think.
Sewell, that's it.
Yeah.
Sewell, yes.
Just a comment. I suspect that the failure that occurred at Sugarloaf may have been before completion of the reservoir, because when it does get exposed in low tides, there's actually a parapet wall. And in the photo you said showing fixing up the repairs, there's no sign of the parapet wall at all. So I think it could have been a bit earlier, just still during construction when it occurred.
No, well, I think it had actually opened. Well, it had been filled up, because that's where the water on the partially compacted clay. That's what caused the problem, because that got lost its strength because it was so wet and not properly compacted. So whether the whole thing had been finished, I'm not sure, but certainly the water level had come right up to the top where it was meant to go.
Richard, it's interesting to compare Yarrawonga with the Wyangler Dam, which was commenced in 1930 and finished in 1935 thereabouts, and the amount of mechanisation and probably planning and capital expended on the construction equipment, large steam shovels and 3-foot gauge tracks, larger locomotives, of course, and the 3-foot gauge tracks. I think they're able to source some Commonwealth funds for the Wyangler Dam, and probably spent more money on it.
Yes. But it's interesting that, you know, the early Eildon, most of that was trucks, you know, no steam loco, was either horse hauled, man hauled, or by gravity.
Yeah.
Yet by what's 1935 for Yarrawonga, you know, they had lots of machinery available, and I don't know if those. Well, when were Malcolm Moore's? They were after the 1915, weren't they?
Yeah, they were in the early 20s.
20s, yeah. So they weren't available.
20s onwards, yeah.
Richard, it's interesting to think about the early construction methods and just how much of it was done by hand.
Oh, yeah.
And how far we've come in 100 years.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, a lot less people, a lot more machinery.
Yes. Yeah, like the stepping in Lauriston Dam, you know, you just would not do it like that anymore.
No.
How was the excavation done on those steps?
Probably a lot of it by hand.
Yeah. Jackhammers they might have had.
Jackhammers, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very surprised that sort of equipment or that sort of excavation at that time.
Yes. Now, whether, you know, it was an unemployment benefit, you know, they used a lot of unemployment. Now, whether that was deliberate, I'm not sure.
The original Goulburn Weir, which is the Nagambie one, is granite blocks, and it predated SR&WSC. I don't know who built it then, but I don't know what techniques would have been used there, but it wasn't concrete.
No, that's true. And I think it was
the trust.
Local water board, or local water trust. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think I was just going to
say, Richard, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. Just want to ask, do you know if there's any of the locos survived, or they've been scrapped? The few that steam and the Malcolm Moores. Do you know anything? What's happened to the equipment in that regard?
I should, but no, I don't. I know a lot of it was sold off after Yarrawonga. No, I don't. I'm sorry. Does anybody else?
I'd say none of them survived.
Yeah, I don't think anything survived.
Yeah.
They all had a hard life, and it's interesting, the correspondence from the engineers on Lauriston, which was the last of them, that, you know, he was pleading with head office to give him better equipment because it was all just worn out. So you're probably right, it hasn't.
Yeah.
Everything was sold, but I don't remember anything. Yeah, continuing on where they popped up, I don't know, but I doubt anything survived.
Yeah.
Just as a comparison, where the comparison to us in New South Wales would be the Burrinjuck Dam. Someone mentioned Wyangler, but Burrinjuck has got a very early interesting history where they used the 4 Crouses, of course.
Yes.
And one of them came to Kiama, and one of them still survives. It's the one that Lake Macquarie that Graham Swanson's done up. And one still is at the dam, but they actually built a line from the standing gauge there at Gundy down right into, and it was a concrete dam, and they've now raised that dam by more meters in for New South Wales reservoirs too. You know, so interesting comparison. You know.
Yes.
Mm. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, like the Eildon one, they had a tramway that sort of went upstream to the sand pits
Yes.
at Barrajack. Yeah. Yeah, it was quite good. But the Barrajack tramway, that was a regular passenger service for all the workers as well. Yeah. It was interesting, though, that they talked about an extension of the Rubicon tramway, but never went ahead with it.
You would have thought it'd be economical, wouldn't you?
Yeah, because they had a siding at Thornton, if I remember correctly, where they used to transship stuff.
Yeah.
There was actually a survey for a VR line all the way to Eildon, and the Rubicon Lumber Company had to give up its easement if the VR line was built.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's lots of correspondence in the records about how much the Rubicon Lumber Company, Tramway Company were charging the state rivers. I think they thought they were being hard done by, but
Yeah.
you know, as you can see, that's the only way they can get material in there.
Yeah. Yeah. You made mention about the Eildon project, how it the cost overruns in it. If it was a tendered job, they probably went for the lowest tender when they should have actually gone for the highest tender, because the ones that the highest tender had probably allowed for everything.
Was it a tendered job, or was it done by effectively day labour within the department?
Direct labour.
I believe it was day labour.
Yep, it was.
Yeah.
But as was noted, salaries went up, and the aftermath of World War I, the boom era of the 20s, of course, was an era of inflation as well, as has happened in other times.
What amazes me is nothing ever changes.
They may well have been.
We see it today with our HS2, again, massive cost overruns. It seems to be part of an ongoing culture.
They may well have been trying to manage the costs within their sort of annual budget, state rivers and water supply, which is why it's stretched out so long.
Yeah, quite possible. Yeah. Right. Any other questions?
Just on that point about the cost overruns, I think it's possibly another example of it's much easier to seek forgiveness than permission.
Yeah.
In other words, just so many public works are undercosted at the start when the approvals go through, and of course, once it gets going, how do you stop it? So, and by then you've got the glory of the project sort of overshadowing any sort of shame that arises from the cost overrun. And I think it's just the way democracy works, to be honest, or doesn't work.
Yeah. Although there was
And with Yarrawonga, it's drained fairly regularly because that's the way they can control some vicious weed, and they'll drain it in May so the frost will kill the weed, and then they refill it, which lets you have a look at the way the river and the valley had been at the time it was constructed.
Right. Okay. Just as a little aside to the Yarrawonga one, I remember camping up there with my parents in the late 1950s, and Dad and I walking out onto that railway bridge and fishing off it. Yeah, and being out there when a steam engine came across. Yeah. Very good. Is that it?
Well, I do like the comment about the British Australia cultural factors. I think has probably got a lot to do with it.
Yeah. Could be.
Bill, I'd like to thank your team again from the Australian side of things. It's a cold grey morning in Harrow, in northwest London, but I've enjoyed listening to Richard's presentation. A really good geography lesson. I just wondered, as the thought occurred to me, most of the water supplies in southern Britain come from the ground, from southeast English chalk. In Wales, in North Wales, there's lots of reservoirs that were built to serve the cities of Liverpool and Manchester and so forth. I wonder what railway construction was involved in their construction.
Yeah. Well, you could do a presentation for us on that.
If I could, I would, I assure you.
We'll get stuck into the
Anyway, what I'm saying, Bill.
Yeah.
There's a very interesting and good series of books on that exact topic. If you have a look at the Industrial Railway Society offerings, there's an author who wrote a whole series of books on reservoir railways in the north of England.
Right. Oh, fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill, for and Richard for another fascinating presentation. It's a really good geography lesson. This. So thank you all very much indeed, and I look forward to the next one. Thank you.
It's quite pleasing to have gentlemen like yourselves from the UK and other countries joining us. It really makes us feel as though we're doing a worthwhile service here.
Well, I must apologise for missing your last one, but I thoroughly enjoy your presentations. They bring a very different perspective to the European rail scene.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, quite different. Well, it's the way things have to be done here. We're so far away from the motherland. An
excellent presentation, and thank you again.
Yes, it's interesting, Bill. You say you're so far away, but this Zoom links us as though you're just down the road from me. It's amazing. There's a very good friend of mine from my student days, whose son has acquired a very nice Australian girlfriend, fiance, and they're right up in Western Australia, right up on the northwest coast there, and they can link home by video like this. When it's sort of 42 degrees in their part of Australia, it's 5 degrees in their part of Scotland. But it's amazing. And again, thank you all.
Pleasure. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. There's nothing else we need to say at the moment. Anybody got anything they want to raise?
Yeah, Bob Goff from Brisbane. I think some of these projects were started with light or medium funds, and they were topped up as the job progressed.
Yeah.
Would there be any reason that you had a surplus of labour after the First World War, and some of these jobs, these dams were built to absorb some of that labour and create employment?
Yes.
Well, it wasn't until the Depression that became the country. There was a great shortage of labour in the years immediately after the First World War, and we also had influenza at that time, which didn't help.
Yeah, and the Depression, what was that? That was 29, 30?
Yeah. We had other projects which were deliberately designed to soak up labour during the time of Depression, but other ones, I think, suffered from starvation, particularly after the end of World War II. Material shortages, labour shortages, that's why we had to bring in so many migrants. That's the whole Snowy scheme, which is not part of tonight's scope.
Yep.
Tramways was very much a soldier employment scheme post the First War.
Yeah. I think about not far from me, to the south of me, the draining of the Kooyrup swamp after the First World War. It was soldier settlement down there, but a lot of them had to abandon it because they weren't farmers.
Yep.
The other thing to keep in mind is that Australia lacked a capital at this stage and was very reliant on borrowings from the UK. and this was a major factor in both, particularly in government funding of projects, and partly explains why in the big projects, like the ones we've heard about today, the technology didn't probably advance as quickly as it might have done otherwise.
Mm.
And for our British friends, because Australia is a dry country, and we had to make maximum use of the water resources we could, and that was the trigger for the projects we've heard tonight and the ones which weren't covered tonight.
Mm.
Well, I think we're also, apart from the large amount of rain we've had recently, the last couple of years, we've also been almost a dry country and suffered from drought.
Relatively.
But I also lived in South Africa for 30 years, so I'm well aware of what dry countries are.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember working in the UK in 1995, and if you went for 2 weeks without rain, there was hosepipe bans imposed.
Yeah.
The Angler Dam in New South Wales, the money provided by the Commonwealth was at 1% interest.
Okay.
Not 1930 to 35.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seems like a pretty good rate.
Yes.
I don't think they're quite so generous these days. Yeah, very good. Okay, is that it?
I'm going to wish you a good night, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and to everyone else for joining us. And Mike, have you got anything you want to add?
No, I had my little bit to say at the front end, Bill. I'm happy. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you as the producer of this show. That's much appreciated.
In the control booth.
Yeah, that's right. You're doing well. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And good night, good morning, wherever you happen to be. And we look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you all. Thank you. See you again next time.
Richard.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thanks, Richard.
Bye.
Well, there you go, Mike. It worked.
Yeah, well done, Richard.
Had you worried there at the start? Oh.
No, cool and calm. I had plan B ready to go. And but you managed to, I knew you would sort it because it worked last night.
Yes.
So there. One thing I'll say to you, it was really good. So very entertaining, and it was easy to relax and listen. It was great.
Good.
One thing I mentioned to you, though, if you start writing it, you need to talk to him about locomotives at Yarrawonga.
Yes.
There were 10.
10.
10 and only one black hawthorn.
Is that right?
Yeah. And there was a days and yeah, that's right.
Right. Okay. Well, that's not what the where did I get all that from?
Yeah, where'd you get that from? I'm interested.
It was out of an old LR, I think. Or...
Yeah, that'd be right. No, it's with the work I did for Redcliffe's.
Yep.
And I did a lot of looking at the Yarrawonga locos.
Right. Good.
In chasing Redcliffe's locos, what happened to them. And it meant working through a lot of correspondence about what moved where. And
yes.
And that meant going through also, that great pile of photographs from the State Library, not just the online ones, but the ones I copied a hell of a lot of them on site because they're not online.
Yes. Anything
with a loco I got. And I think I got it pretty well. I got to the end of it. And anyway, there were 10, not at the same time. I think the maximum at any time might have been 6, but 10 different locomotives, yeah. But anyway, that's for the future.
It is. Yeah, I've got to do a fair bit of work on Yarrawonga.
Well, I hope you do, because there's it's an interesting subject, and you've got that came through. You've got the engineering background to understand what's going on.
Yes.
And I'm actually awestruck by engineers back in those days, in particular.
Yep.
Because without all the modern technology and equipment that that is available around today, they had to be very innovative about how they did things. And
yes,
and you talked about the gallows crane. Well, there was probably a manual somewhere about how to do that, but maybe not. Maybe it's just built on site. It didn't bring it in.
Yes.
So all that sort of thing.
Yep.
It really astounds me. But when I was at the MMBW, I had an association with tunnel boring machines, and I worked at a compressed air tunnel boring site for a couple of years, and so I've always had a bit of an interest. But I've seen tunnel boring activity, like I read descriptions of it going back into like the 1890s, and there was a similarity about the techniques that they were using then to what they were using in the 1980s.
Yeah, that's true.
And the difference was really in terms of the gear they had available to extract, the soil and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and compare that with what they've got now with these. It's like a long train. It's almost automated.
Yeah,
amazing to watch them.
Yeah, well, again, I remember being in one of the MMBW tunnels in the late 70s, and it was the same sort of thing, but obviously, much more basic technology even for then.
Yes.
But I remember being up in the tunnel boring machine while it was churning away on the southeastern trunk sewer, and there was a guy there steering it, literally, and he had a target with a light, probably laser, beamed onto it, and he had to keep that light in the middle. The surveyors would reset that target every so often.
Yep.
His job was to keep that pinpoint of light in the middle.
Yep.
And off he went.
Whereas now, none of that now.
It's all computerized. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But still, they had the train behind, all the muck was coming off.
Yep.
And behind the boring machine or the excavator, and the shields, and going on a conveyor and being dumped into rail trucks in those days and been taken off. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Anyway, well done. Appreciate it. Yeah.
No, pleasure. Now,
all right, I'll scoot. Yeah. See you, Les.
See you, Les. Thanks for your comments. I know your captions. They're good.
Okay, night all.
Yep. See you later.